Welcome to AGX Pioneers, the podcast that spotlights the triumphs and trials of innovators who are reshaping various industries. Join us as Daniel shares his BYTON experience, providing valuable lessons for entrepreneurs and corporate executives on managing innovative businesses in disruptive markets. Buckle up and let's get this show on the road. Today, our host Michael Maeder, Asia Growth Exchange Board Member, chats with Dr. Daniel Kirchert. Daniel is a serial entrepreneur in electric mobility and has run big car companies like BMW and Infiniti in China. He also co-founded BYTON, an EV startup with a bold vision to build a car that would turn heads in the industry. But then the pandemic hit.
So, Daniel, welcome. I'm so excited to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Michael. I'm very much looking forward to our discussion.
Thanks. Yeah, when I recently checked my notes, when I actually first consciously encountered BYTON, I actually looked into my little script and I found a presentation from 2018. And this was presented by a renowned automotive expert in Shanghai. And the title was China's Auto Industry in the Age of Disruption, which I think is a very fitting theme, and two things that really stuck with me and have a particular relevance for today's conversation. First, BYTON and you as a founder back then were already mentioned 5 years ago alongside leading e-mobility pioneers in Asia like NIO's William Li and others. Second, this presentation already hinted at that moment at how the Chinese automotive industry would become a global force of disruption. And I think this is all nowadays becoming reality. So with that said, to start things off, could you briefly sketch out the journey of BYTON since its inception in 2016 until today to set a bit of a backdrop?
I need to start basically, I was in the Silicon Valley in 2012, at that time together with some BMW executives. That was a kind of training program, and we visited Tesla. That was even before they launched the Model S. They just moved into this old factory, and this was a very deep impression on me. I was somehow fascinated, but I saw that most of my colleagues and friends, they were just smiling at this in a bit of arrogant way, and but I felt this is special. And I also had the chance to talk once with Elon Musk, so despite I didn't 100% agree with him at that time on some topics we discussed, but it was fascinating for me. So in the back of my mind, this was working for quite some time. And then actually in 2013, 14, Tesla's rise began, right? So the share price exploded, and then everyone's in China thought, oh, maybe we build a Chinese Tesla. And then together with one investor, I was nurturing this idea. But in the end, the real inspiration was not just to do a Chinese Tesla. We thought, okay, Tesla is a great electric car, but we were more inspired by Apple to do this. And I said, okay, if this kind of complete revolution of the smartphone world, where the Nokias and Motorola's were disrupted, this also is going to happen in the automotive industry. Yeah, and the electrical thing is a given already. Yeah, and everything in the car will become a smart device on wheels. Yeah, so we were convinced by this. Yeah, together with some of the early investors and early team members, and we had a sketch of this already of a big screen in a car and the steering wheel becoming a touchpad. And we thought, that's it, right? So this is really the thing we go for. Yeah? And then a lot of us dropped great corporate jobs to jump into the sea, and that in 2016 we really set up the company. And it was an up and down. It's a long story, so I will try to keep it short. In the beginning, we already had big issues because the original investor, Tencent and Foxconn, were out. Right, so we thought these two are the backers. We don't need to worry about money, but actually after a few months, due to various reasons, they were out. And the other Chinese founding investor, he disappeared, right, which happens sometimes in China. So we are completely on our own. We were there, no money, no investors, and we had to explain why these investors had left, right? And then we had to really become entrepreneurs, right? So to be honest, in the first stage, we were more or less attracted by some very great investors, but then we had to become the entrepreneurs ourselves, and we had to invest our own money. We had to start to do fundraising ourselves, and then, but to keep it short, we were then quite successful to make a partnership with the local government. We started really with this vision to make it a global company rooted in China. I mean, keeping the German design in Munich. So we set up a design office there. We set up an engineering team in Santa Clara in Silicon Valley. And we moved our headquarters to Nanjing, which happens to be the city where I studied before in China, where we got a very strong support from the local government. And that was somehow the idea, to combine the best of these different worlds, right? So the German, the Chinese environment, the supply chain advantage, the Chinese speed, the great investment environment, but the traditional German engineering qualities and design, as well as the tech part from Silicon Valley. And we worked very hard. We started to build a factory. We designed a great car, the BYTON M-Byte, and we launched it in January 2018 in the CES. And that was a big bang. And I think that really exceeded also all of our own imaginations, but we hit the sweet spot with the smart device on wheels. And the design was perceived very well. We had this very disruptive design of a big coast-to-coast screen in the car, which wasn't seen until then.
And I think a lot of the CEOs from the incumbent OEMs, they were also checking out the car. I remember them sitting in the car and sort of checking it out.
Yeah, that's right. I think nearly every single of the global CEOs from every OEM, we hosted them and showed them the car. And I also know that most of them really, in their mind, saw us as a main upcoming competitor. So we were making good progress. We were finishing the factory in Nanjing. We were building prototypes, doing the tests, everything. And basically we were out, let's say, a little bit less than 1 year from serial production, just doing the final part, when COVID hit us in early 2020. And unfortunately, then we were...
So there was an operational prototype. It was just a matter of getting this ready for mass production.
Yeah, so there would have been still some work to do on the serial development, but we already had close to 100 prototypes. So, and I believe we could have had the potential to be up there with companies like NIO and Xiaopeng if we would have made it. But unfortunately, this COVID timing really hurt us very much with our financing. Investors who had committed money before, they stepped out and said they need to wait, and that basically led us to running short of money. And our existing shareholders, which were mainly government-owned entities, the local government and FAW, they didn't provide a timely bridge financing. So with a very, very sad heart, I had to decide to leave in middle of 2020. And unfortunately, since then, the company has not been able, let's say, to finish the job and bring the product out. So, of course, this was very tough for me because this was somehow my own baby. And we had a great team with great people built up there. And this great dream, let's put it like this. So not seeing that come to fruition and then having to lay off people, having to leave the company myself in the end, this was very tough for me. But of course, I had a chance to reflect on the positive things and also on the things I would do differently. And you have to take it away as a great learning. And I think at least what we are seeing, all these things we believed in, it's happening right now, right? Like the Chinese brands are taking on the world, right? And we see this major disrupting happening.
Yeah, you gave the keyword disruption, and I think that's something I would like to pick up on because if I look at the whole BYTON story, I think one thing that really sticks out as unique compared to many of the other stories in the mobility space is two things actually. One is this very disruptive view on a traditional industry, this iPhone on wheels idea, which seems very intuitive, but no one else came up with this before, at least not to my knowledge. So sort of a unique angle, and at the same time this, let's call it born global idea, right? So you don't start as a Chinese setting up a company in China, but you're a German with a long history, of course, in China, but then setting up a team from the start in the US, in the Silicon Valley, in Munich, as well as a large team in China. Maybe you can add a little bit to this idea of disruption and how this connects to this element of cultural diversity that is this born global element that you had with you had with BYTON.
Yeah, I think so. I think originally when we set up BYTON, we were already convinced that making a great electric car is already not disruptive enough because there was already Tesla. And we assumed that all the other OEMs are going to move towards this much faster. We were wrong, right? I mean, having at that point of time done a great electric car would have been even enough to disrupt. But we thought the much bigger disruptor is this wave of the car becoming a connected device, the screens, the interaction. And of course, the reason for this is this long-term autonomous driving solution. I mean, the car's becoming more independent in terms of driving, so you will be able to make that your third space or your fourth space, the car, right? And use that as an office, use that as whatever, right? And then have this big screen in there. So this was a vision. We had the sketch even before we set up this company. And we were already feeling these forces from all kind of sides to go back to something more conventional. Oh, this is not possible. It's impossible to do that, right? So you hear this so many times. So many times people want to educate us. So the one thing we did right was right from the beginning, stick to the impossible thing. So to make this kind of crazy big screen, it's a little bit different to what we are seeing right now because this screen was very far away. So it required us to make a complete different engineering of the cockpit. Yeah, and so this was only so successful because we stick with this vision in the beginning and we worked on a path to make this possible. Yeah? And of course, those concerns, they came mainly from the automotive guys, right? So the tech guys, of course, it's no problem, right? But then the tech guys, they couldn't have also done it alone. So we had to find a kind of very healthy cultural synergy between the tech guys who worked on the screen, on the hardware, on the operating system, on the UI and so on. These were all tech guys, really no automotive guys, yeah, like a couple of hundred of them. Yeah, they had no clue. I mean, what's the requirement for the car, right? And the automotive guys. Yeah, in many companies, these two cultures are very different. And we tried from the beginning to get a balance, right? I mean, to have mutual respect, not one side looking down on the other one. And we said, this is the key of making this work, making a great car, but having this tech on the first level. So we put this kind of function, everyone who did this smart device, including the touchpad and the steering wheel, this was the first line function out of traditional R&D in the company. And so we kept this idea and we made it. So I mean, the reason for BYTON not making it in the end was not because this technology didn't work out, right? I mean, it was really a financing issue. And I personally was really driven by this idea of combining the best worlds. This really motivated me, and is also the part where I'm most proud of. That we partially made this kind of a global team. Because being a German, having spent more than 20 years in China, and somehow having become my second home place also, I really believe that if you combine the best of those worlds, you will get something which is far bigger. I mean, this is kind of fundamentally believing in globalization, making use of the different strengths. It's very different to what we are seeing now over the last few years of everything being in a competitive way, but making use of the great, innovation in Silicon Valley, making use of the speed in China, but still putting in this German strengths of doing it in a very systematic, orderly way. So, and I think we were able to do that. It was very important for BYTON because we were somehow a foreigner-founded startup in China, which is quite unusual in this size. It was very important to get in also good Chinese colleagues on this top level. And then we had 20 different nationalities, combinations out of all different areas. And I think, of course, you always have cultural clashes, but I think we were able to create a kind of startup culture. Not a national culture like this is a Chinese company or German company or Silicon Valley company, startup culture. So mutual respect, everyone driven by passion and this vision. And we had so many people who left great jobs in very well-paid jobs, very high-level jobs in corporations to join us because they were driven by this vision. They were fascinated by doing something disruptive. And this was so powerful to get these people. But the respect was very important, and then the hard work, and also a kind of empowerment. People had the feeling in this, I mean, I get my responsibility and I'm responsible to do it, and no one is checking on me every day if I do my job properly. And this was a great culture, I think. And I think we can take something away from that. But in nowadays world, I would say it gets more difficult to do something like that, because the US, China is actually drifting apart, or we see a kind of negative spiral happening here. So it will be more difficult to build these kind of teams. Reflecting now of what I would do differently, I think when we set up the company in 2016, we still, even us, we underestimated the capability of Chinese engineers to develop great cars. And if I would do it again, I would probably make it much more focused in China and do it locally there, because you will get a higher speed and a higher flexibility. And actually the biggest challenge of having a lot of people in the team who were very long in the corporations, which is naturally because engineering cars before was always done in big corporations, right? But the big challenge is that you, a lot of people are really struggling to transfer their experience into a setup where you're in a startup, right? So they think they need to do it exactly the same way, or it needs to run exactly the same way, but it doesn't work. Yeah, if you use BMW or Volkswagen, you spend $1 billion for engineering a car with all these suppliers, with all the back offices. If you do the same thing in a startup setting, you have to do it with much less resources and money, and you have to do it much faster, right? And people who have worked too long in this, sometimes they're struggling with this. Of course, there's also
the struggle with bootstrapping.
Yeah, they struggle with bootstrapping and then thinking out of the box. And I remember many examples where we benchmark Chinese companies developing a car, let's say for $100 million. That's 1/10 of what the European company is spending on this, at least in the premium sector. Then they don't believe it, right? So it's, even if you have all the facts and figures, they don't believe it, right? So, and it's possible in China. And I think despite we're out of China, the whole engineering approach, if you would have done a little bit more the Chinese way, maybe we would have done the whole thing with less money and we could have made it. So that's my thinking about this. Right, because what you see now in China, actually this year, the penetration of electric cars in China already reached close to 30%. And this is mainly driven not by the fact that electric car is much better than a gasoline car, or that it is much cheaper. It is not at this point of time. But that those electric cars are providing better in-car entertainment, better user interface, new functions. So this is the ultimate driver in China for consumers not to radically switch to electric cars, interestingly, right? So this is really something providing consumer value. And that's also the reason why now the foreign brands and also the German brands, I mean, Volkswagen used to be the leader in China, are now falling behind, right? They were having 25 to 30% market share like 20 years ago. Now they were just overtaken by BYD in the Chinese market. And the main reason is that in gasoline cars, they're still keeping their market share. But within electric cars, everyone is buying Chinese cars or Tesla. And there's a very, very tiny section of foreign electric cars which can still be there.
Great. Now we have spoken about product innovation. I think one thing that really stuck with me as well during this time, 2018-19, was how much hype there was around BYTON. I mean, there was not even a driving car, I mean, on the road, but there was already a lot of talk, not just in China, but globally for that matter, but I think quite intensively in China. And I think this is also partly due to the fact that you have approached this whole go-to-market marketing differently than the more conventional brands in that market. Maybe you can speak a little bit to this, on what was your approach there.
That's right. So right from the beginning, we were convinced, being a startup, a new entrant, that we need to build this brand together with the consumers. And we didn't call them consumers, we call them fans, right? So even for the brand name, We did huge research, and together with fans, right? Like people who like this original design and so on. We came up with this name BYTON, Bytes on Wheels, and resonated well. And right from the beginning, we said we want to co-create everything we do. Yeah? So that means we involve potential customers. So it's quite different than traditional market research. Yeah? So it's really finding the people who have a high affinity to your product or to a design or what you're doing, and then asking them if they want to be part of the process. And then we did regular focus groups with them. Yeah? For example, how do we do the UI interface? Yeah? How do we do the brand? How do we do the brand store? How do we design these things? And it was amazing, yeah. The feedback we got so many applicants. We did this in Europe, we did this in China, we did this in the US, and we got so many people applying for that. I just recently met a very famous German investor, and he told me at that time, he's an i3 driver, so he loves electric cars. And he told me at that time he applied to become a BYTON co-creator. He was rejected. So that was fantastic. So what's so good about this? I think it's two things. On the one side, you're of course getting really great customer feedback, and of course, the thing with the big screen, this was not similar like the iPhone user interface. This was not done by consumer feedback. This was a kind of top-down idea. But in the way how to implement it, how to make the functions well, yeah, how to improve, this was a very rapid kind of feedback loop. Yeah? And just the fact of an engineer who develops the stuff talking directly to a potential customer, this doesn't happen in big car companies usually. Yeah? So that was very good. And created a very good culture also in the company, a good mindset. But on the other hand, this became really the branding of the company, because these co-creators, they became the kind of brand ambassadors. They went out, some of them, they created Facebook fan groups and whatever. Some of them started to create BYTON merchandise, articles and so on. It created really a movement. And we didn't spend a lot of money on marketing, but in Europe we had already quite a high brand awareness and fan base. And this was genuine and authentic, you know. So this was not, this money cannot buy, right? So you get a great product, you have a good culture of listening to the people, and this really creates hardcore fans. And hardcore fans influence people around them, yeah? And it's genuine, it's authentic. I think this is a kind of modern way of how to build a brand, how you should do it. Of course, you can't just copy and paste it to any other industry, but I think this is the right way of doing it.
If you take sort of a forward-looking view and outlook, try to visualize this. What are we expecting? Maybe sort of scenario that we're looking at in the automotive industry.
In my view, I think there's going to be an earthquake in the European market.
Currently, it's still a luxury hobby. But
it is. No one has been able to really bring out affordable, great electric vehicle. And I see this coming out of China, not necessarily from BYD, but the car they showed now in Shanghai, this goes towards this direction. And that's the most meaningful thing. If you talk about electrification, getting rid of ICEs and emissions, it's really, the prices have to come down, and they need to be great products in this price range around $20,000. But BYD is just one brand. I mean, there's many more brands, and I've been looking into this now because of Noyo as well. I think there's at least 15 to 20 Chinese brands coming to Europe. And this has been completely underestimated, even by the car company. So I think we're going to see a major market shakeup. Because actually you can't get great electric vehicles out of European OEMs at this point of time, with very few exceptions, or sometimes then at a much too high price. And we will see very great electric vehicles in a similar price range as Tesla. And Tesla is playing in their own league right now. There's nearly no one coming close price-wise, or even below that out of China. And the good thing in Europe is the market is quite objective, quite rational. A good product will win in the end. So you will see all the tests and so on. So I think next 2 or 3 years we will see a shift. I personally would say up to 1/3 of European market in a couple of years can be conquered by Chinese brands.
What is sort of the time frame, 2030 or?
Yeah, I would say until 2030, it's possible, right? And that's a major shift. And of course, I won't say it's very easy for a Chinese brand to enter Europe. It's a tough market. It's different, but the products are very good, and the cost base is so much better. And now you can see this. The Chinese government started even 15 years ago to make this a kind of national development strategy to say electric vehicle that was before 2010, become a major goal in the next 5-year plan, with everything belonging to that. And that nearly meant not just pushing a couple of car companies to produce electric cars, but starting to develop the critical supply chain of batteries and of raw materials and all the other components, right? And that took quite a long time. Companies like CATL probably would have never emerged without that kind of blueprint from the central government. And this took quite a long time. But now you have an industry in China, not just these manufacturers, but the whole supply chain being there, having the capacity and having this cost structure, which is at least 20 to 30% more competitive than a European or North American cost structure. So these cars are coming in, not just at great quality, much better car quality than Tesla, in my view, and similar energy efficiency, great design, quality matching European companies, but at a 20 to 30% lower cost base.
And so this is truly disruptive. Service approach.
Absolutely. And then, of course, the cars, they have these big screens. They have a great user interface. And I also like driving in a Mercedes or BMW or Audi, but the one thing which is really painful is the screen and the user interface. So it's something that's very difficult to change for those companies. So the Chinese cars are miles ahead in that. Right, and they're adjusting this, of course, to the European market. You can't just copy the content from China one to Europe. So that's bringing a major change.
How do you see this? You started speaking about supply chain. How do you see this trickle down into the tier 1, tier 2 supplier base? I guess a glimmer of hope could be that many of the Western tier 1, tier 2 suppliers are very often the engine behind a lot of the innovations, right? So maybe you can speak a little bit. You have touched upon it extensively on the OEM level, but maybe also on the supply chain level.
Yeah, you said it very right, Michael. I think really the driver of innovation in the industry are mainly the suppliers, not so much the OEMs. And to be honest, I think European OEMs have been driven. They have been more reacting than acting. And I think that's the biggest mistake. In these times of change, you need to take, let's say, a courageous step to lead and not just be a follower. Otherwise, you really, it's impossible to win this game if you're just a follower, in my point of view. And the suppliers, actually, it was the same time at BYTON, right? Despite BYTON did something very radical, but we are working with some of the top suppliers like Bosch and Faurecia, and they were seeing this as a great showcase to do their new innovations in our car, which the traditional OEMs at that time wouldn't even consider, right? So I think there's some hope for the European supply base. All of them are, of course, also in China, and they're making partially use already of Chinese cost structures. But for the OEMs, I'm a bit more skeptical. For me, the takeaway for a corporation would be, if you want to really transform your company, do these disruptive changes, maybe you need to do entrepreneurship and make your own startup as a firewall to the rest of your organization and use that to transform your business. Maybe even launch a new brand and new technology. And partially this was done, but not in a radical way. I think it should have been done, in my point of view.
So dare to be different and persist with it and stay different.
Yeah, persist it and, let's say, protect this kind of setup in a way not to get, because in legacy organizations, no one wants to make themselves abundant. So that's why you need to protect these kind of innovative pockets, and you can't be part of a big organization. In a big organization, it won't happen. Oh. So you have to really, I think, have a different setup, a small setup. No matter if you're a startup or a big organization, you need to find a setup which allows these kind of radical ideas to go one step further and not kill all the good ideas at an early stage.
Right.
If I would do it again, the BYTON experience, as I said, probably I would take a bit closer look at the people in the beginning to really make sure, not just looking at their track record on their CV, but really looking whether these people from the values and from their mindset have this kind of startup mindset, have this kind of openness also to challenge some of the things they learned in their past. Yeah? So maybe sometimes it's better to get someone with 5 to 10 years experience than someone with 25 years experience, yeah, if the mindset isn't right.
Right.
Setting up a startup, I think the two most important things is who are your investors, who gives you the money, who is your shareholders, and who are the core people you do this with, right? And without going to any details here, I would say these two things you should not make any compromise, and better don't do the business, right? So you should only take money from people you know they are really aligned with you, and if it goes well and also doesn't go well, right? So this is very important, and sometimes if you're not sure about this, better take a break, right? And wait and keep it.
Thanks a lot, Daniel. This was super insightful, very invigorating, and with this I think we can close. Thanks a lot for your time and much appreciated. Before you go, this episode of AGX Pioneers was brought to you by Asia Growth Exchange. Stay tuned for more content coming up.